I'm Old Norse specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. I teach at the University of Colorado Boulder, previously at UC Berkeley and UCLA. And now, armed with a new microphone, which I think I'm beginning to understand how to use, I'm back for another one of my videos about a topic in Norse language or myth. My subject today is the relationship between the Norse gods and the, quote, giants, a word which I am very much inclined to write in scare quotes or say in scare quotes whenever it comes up in a Norse mythological context, because giant is really not a good translation of the Old Norse word jոտun or of Thors, either one of which is used pretty much what looks like interchangeably to speak about these beings. Jոտun is probably etymologically related to the same root that is in English eat, Old Norse eta, seemingly meaning simply that they are eaters or consumers of what, who knows. And then Thors seems to be a pretty old word in Germanic for monstrous beings in general. So Thors is a more negative term than Jotun typically, and Jotun is what we see more often and what I say more often for these beings. And I say beings, though, the general understanding that I think people have in English, which is based on the translation giant, which is really an unfortunate translation, is that this is a different species of beings from the gods, when really it is a different family. And not even that different of a family, since the gods and giants are closely interlinked by blood and marriage. So, for example, if we start with the very first living being according to Norse mythology, that is Ymir, and he is called by Snorri a Hrimthurs, meaning frost giant. All right. We don't know if the Hrimthurs really is something different from your basic Thors or giant. It could just be that terms like this that are appended to the beginning of the word Thors are just there to be used for alliterative purposes, right? So if we need to alliterate with the H, we can call a giant a Hrimthurs. We certainly see that in Eddic poetry. But at any rate, he is some kind of giant or Jotun. Now, he is alone at the very beginning of creation, but his armpits sweat and produce children, and his legs have, they engage in coitus with one another and produce children. And among those children is someone named Bolthor, if we read Havamal, or Bolthorn, if we read Snorri's Prose Edda. This is the grandfather of Odin. And in fact, in Havamal, Odin, the god, says that he learned spells from a son of Bolthor, meaning, of course, an uncle of Odin, but by implication a giant. Bolthor's daughter is Bestla, and that is Odin's mother. So Odin himself is at least half giant. Now the other side of Odin's family comes from Buri, who was licked out of a block of ice by the primeval cow Auðhumbla. Buri has a son named Bor and Voluspa, but Bor by Snorri. Who knows what's the original, but I'd probably prefer what Voluspa says and go with Bur. And then it is he and Bestla that have Odin. Now, it's not really that clear what type of being, Jotun or Os, one of the Aesir, that we should count Buri and Bor as being. I suppose they probably ought to be counted as Aesir, since typically these things are reckoned by the father's line in Norse thinking. So since Odin, though his mother is a Jotun, is considered one of the Aesir, probably his father and grandfather would be too. But then Odin himself does not stick with Aesir women. He is married to Frigg, whose ancestry is pretty shadowy, though of course there's the notion that she might be Froya, in which case she would be one of the Vanir. But he has many sexual relations with giant women, Jotun women, including, for example, Gríðr, who is the mother of his son Vidar, and Vidar will avenge Odin against Fenrir Ragnarok. But very importantly, Odin has children with Jörð, Earth, including Thor. So Thor is half giant, or really 3/4 giant, And yet his main job is going out and killing giants, right? Because, of course, your own family identity and fidelity goes through your father's line, through Odin's line. And Thor himself is not without his affairs with giant women. The ancestry of Siv is a little bit unclear, possibly traces through Ullr, who appears to be one of the Aesir. But he has children with giant women too. For instance, he has his son Magni with the giant woman, Jotun woman, Jornsaksa. Although he has Thrúður with Siv, who is sometimes called Elja Jornsoksu, or co-wife of Jornsaksa. So that's an interesting little note. I don't know what it's like to be sister wife among the gods. But note that, like I said, since these identities and fidelities are reckoned through the father's line, Loki is an exception and an exceptional character, not because he's half giant, and he is, but because it is his dad who's the giant, right? Thorbauti is the Jotun, who is the father of Loki, but Loki is the son of the Aesir woman Laufey too. Notice that he is consistently called Loki Laufey's son, never Thorbautis' son. This probably has to do not just with the fact that Laufey's son alliterates with Loki, so you get a nice poetic line for free just by naming him and his mom, but also because the mom is higher ranking, right? And the gods are very classist, very status conscious in a way. The Aesir are higher ranking than the jÓtnar, and between them are the Vanir. The Vanir are not quite as high ranking as the Aesir. In this society, men are expected to marry at an even social level or down one social level. Women are expected to marry even or up one social level. And it's very notable that the Vanir men are not allowed to marry up to Aesir women. They marry down to jÓtnar women, right? Freyr marries Gerður in the famous story told in Forskirnis in the Poetic Edda, and Njörður marries Skadi. Both of these are originally Jotun women. They are jÓtnar. So there's this strong class consciousness that runs between these divisions. And, you know, I am not familiar enough with 19th and early 20th century writings on these subjects to understand exactly why in English we started translating this as giant. But it really does a disservice to what a complicated relationship it is between these families. Because also we see that it's a more tragic story, right? The jÓtnar and the Aesir and their allies, the Vanir, fighting is not, you know, it's not human-looking beings versus some completely alien-looking beings. It's people fighting their cousins, their nephews, their parents, right? In Hymiskvida, we see Tyr actually siding with Thor against his father, who is Hymir, one of the jÓtnar. So it's curious that Tyr, of course, a god who, by placing his hand in the mouth of Fenrir, Loki's son, is an upholder of order, unlike Loki, who is, of course, an instigator of chaos, is also fathered by a Jotun, but there's all kinds of things you could speculate about there. At any rate, it's very class conscious. They are different families, but strongly interlinked families. They're Hatfields and McCoys, where half of the Hatfields have McCoy mothers. And, you know, I think that's a much richer story than the sort of interspecies conflict that we see told by so many sort of simplified versions of Norse mythology and popular culture. I hope this video has been somewhat interesting and informative in answering your questions or reminding you about some facts from Norse mythology. I make these videos twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week if I have something non-Norse sort of to talk about. I am supported by the very generous donations of my Patreon supporters, some of whom will be listed at the end of this video. And I encourage you to join that Patreon community if you'd like to help me keep making these videos that do make a big difference in my life. These Patreon donations do. I also have translated the Poetic Edda, one of our most important sources, I'd say the most important source of Norse mythology that has survived from the Middle Ages, as well as the saga of the Volsungs, and I'm working on the Prose Edda and the saga of Hrolf Kraki and the saga of Hervor and Heidrek. That's a B by the camera, I think. I also have the audiobook of the Poetic Edda, translated by me and narrated by me, debuting November 13th from Blackstone Audio, so you can already pre-order that. For now, from high and beautiful Colorado, I am wishing you all the best.